Protests like this are becoming a daily occurrence in Colombo. The economy is buckling under rising prices and unemployment. And demonstrators are laying blame on the policies of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa and his brother Mahinda, who serves as Prime Minister.
People are fighting because they have been fed up of this system for a long time, not just a year or two. Like, we have been fed up for a very long time, and now it's the time for us to get together and just shout out to act against this corrupted system.
Soaring international prices for fuel and other commodities drove inflation up to more than 18% last month. Spending on imports has also drained Sri Lanka's foreign exchange reserves, which have fallen to less than $500 million. Hoping to attract more funds, the central bank doubled the benchmark interest rate to 14.5% last week. But that's done little to arrest the economic decline. And the government says it's unable to meet its international debt obligations.
Recent events, including the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and the fallout from the hostilities in Ukraine, have so eroded Sri Lanka's fiscal position that continued normal servicing of external public debt obligations has become impossible.
While his cabinet members and central bank governor quit last week, Rajapaksa is holding on to power. And his government is blaming demonstrations for impeding the economic recovery.
Even though it can't be done in 2 or 3 days, we are working to end this crisis as soon as possible. Every minute you protest in the streets, we lose our ability to earn dollars.
His pleas have done little to quell anger on the streets. Several demonstrators have set up camp outside the president's office and say they won't leave until he does.
This protest won't be ending until this corrupt Rajapaksa regime would be brought down and they would be jailed and our money is back. Until then, we will not back down.
Analysts say an economic lifeline from the IMF will only come if the government agrees to scale back spending and raise taxes. But that could mean even more anger and unrest at a time when Rajapaksa's government is already teetering on the edge. Tayyibe Aydin, TRT World.
And for more on this story, let's go to Chayu Damsinghe. He's an economist at Frontier Research and joins us from Colombo. Welcome to the program, Chayu. Now, how did we get here in Sri Lanka? Like, obviously, there are other economies hurting also from high fuel prices, but what else is happening to the Sri Lankan economy?
Right. Thanks for having me. And like you reported a few seconds ago as well, one key thing that brought us here is that our macroeconomic numbers from before the pandemic were quite weak. We cut taxes quite heavily at the end of 2019 when this new regime came in. And we also saw during the pandemic a lot of money printing and monetization of the debt. That led to a lot of money coming into the system, further increasing our imports. People had more money, they imported more. That led to more and more money going out of the country. That came as a result after the tax cuts led to our country's sovereign credit rating getting downgraded, which meant that we couldn't borrow internationally, or at least in capital markets, to kind of bridge that deficit that the country has always really had. So those factors really came in together at the same time that the pandemic did, which brought down our tourism income, and then now with oil prices rising, further increasing our import expenditure. So our reserves have been falling, like reported now. Definitely the usable number is less than that 500 million number we talked about. So all of those really combined to really barrel down the crisis right to where we are now.
Right, so to get out of this crisis, one of the key things the government wants to do is to get an emergency loan from the IMF. Foremost talks there start on Monday. What kind of strings do you expect to be attached to that money that would help Sri Lanka's economy? And how would those strings, like higher taxes, affect the economy and consumers there?
Yeah, like you said, higher taxes, that is rationalizing the budget using higher taxes, cutting down on unnecessary expenditures, very much something that's in line. Raising interest rates is also something that would come in line with that. We've already done that pretty significantly. Rationalizing the way the exchange rate flows according to market conditions also was done. So a significant part of this has already either started or is in line. The Secretary of the Treasury and the Central Bank Governor, newly appointed, did talk about all of these factors and the requirement for those moving forward. One key aspect that the IMF requires, because our debt is considered unsustainable, is to start off with a debt restructuring program with our creditors. unrelated to the IMF, a parallel process that we have to begin and get to some level of conclusion before really engaging with the IMF on a more concrete footing. So that will also take time. So yes, there will be lots of negative impact as a result of these, well, essentially contractionary policies to reduce increasing interest rates, increasing taxes. That will bring pain onto the people. But hopefully the fact that this allows more space in the budget to send money or divert money to the poorest of our communities, that is also something the IMF would also likely have as a condition, increased welfare spending to the poor. Hopefully that does reduce the negative impacts on the most vulnerable members of the community, whereas the more middle income, higher income groups will have to take more of a relative hit accordingly.
So these strings that are going to come attached to this IMF money, this isn't going to be popular, is it? So what kind of response do you expect from the public?
That is a very difficult question right now, because as a result of the public protests, and the public protests themselves show it, there is a question of legitimacy of the government, whether the political system that we're having right now is stable. Will the structures, or rather even the government that is in now, will it be the same government that is there in a month's time? So these are questions that are difficult to answer, and therefore tie back into that question. Is this easy to do? Will this even be accepted? Right now, the government is, in terms of its numbers, still quite relatively strong. So it is possible for them to push through these actions. And one other point, of course, is that the alternative, which we are currently facing, which is really long power cuts, shortage. I mean, a power cut right now doing this. All of these is significantly worse for the people. So it is a possibility that the people do acknowledge the requirement that is there, but there is a question how that comes along with the political requirements and the political call coming from the people as well, and whether a different arrangement brings more legitimacy to these difficult policy measures coming forward.
All right. Chayu Damsinghe from Colombo, thank you for helping break down the story for us.